Good morning, VWBPE presenters. We have arrived at our last day of conference and we have another amazing lineup of presentations and social events today. We begin this morning with our first featured speaker of the day, Susan Toth Cohen. Susan is professor and director of the Post-Professional Clinical Doctorate in Occupational Therapy at Thomas Jefferson University. She also serves as co-chair of the online education learning community of the Jefferson Center for Teaching and Learning. She has participated actively in Second Life for over 7 years and is the director of the Occupational Therapy Center at Jefferson in Second Life, which includes an adapted playground and the Garden of Healthy Aging. She has published 5 articles about virtual worlds in healthcare education and presented aspects of this topic at national conferences. Friends and colleagues, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next featured speaker, Susan Toth Cohen.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak. Today, I will discuss my experiences as an educator in Second Life. I'm going to attempt to synthesize the many aspects of this complex role and to share some things that I've learned along the way. I'm hoping that I can stimulate some discussion and some ideas and help to convey how you might be able to apply some of what we will discuss today to your own work. Now, I have to tell you that when I read the description on the Virtual Worlds Best Practices in Education website, I was very surprised to see the statement that I would share my life-changing sorry, I have my something on my screen. My life-changing work of applying virtual worlds in my graduate program for occupational therapy. I thought to myself, wow, that's an understatement, is it not? But then the more I thought about it, and as I prepared this presentation, I realized that the experience has been life-changing, both for myself and for my students. So first, let me tell you how the journey began. I will also share what I'd like to convey today. So after attending this presentation, I hope that you will be able to describe the long-term process of engagement in education with virtual worlds, which, as mentioned, is over 7 years, exploring and implementing virtual world education with graduate students in occupational therapy. I'd also like to discuss ways that virtual worlds can facilitate student learning and facilitate professional development, as well as to support faculty scholarship. In addition, I want to identify ways to establish and promote the use of virtual worlds as venues for legitimate scholarship, and to discuss ways, explore ways, I'm by no means an expert on this last part, harnessing the power of virtual worlds as social networks. And to do this, I would like to use the diffusion of innovation theory as a framework, because I think it can be useful. So a few words about the very beginning of this journey. In 2007, I attended Drexel University's e-learning conference in Philadelphia. Kevin Jarrett, whom some of you may know, presented an introduction to Second Life and its potential uses and benefits for education, which of course we know are many. I went home and immediately created my avatar, Zuza Thompson. Same day, I was hooked. Things happened very fast, especially during this beginning period, with many important events happening from when I started it in March to July of 2007. One important step was to join the International Society for Technology and Education, ISTE, in Second Life. I also became a volunteer docent, which was a great way to learn how to navigate the virtual world, learn about what was going on in education in Second Life. Another thing that I did, needing a place to have as a home base, is that I began the lease of 2 parcels in Second Life. I leased at EDU Island 2 and at the New Media Consortium. Not sure of which one I would prefer. And I'll talk a little bit more later about the whole process of choosing where to make my home there. I was also very fortunate to meet Maged Kamel Boulis, whose brilliance definitely taught me so much about Second Life, virtual worlds, and social media, pretty much everything under the sun. And I was able to become an investigator with him for his grant for promoting sexual health in Second Life through sexual health sim that we had. I also began work with Carolina Keats at Health Info Island and met Gentle Heron, of course, who is the creator of Virtual Ability and who has been probably the single most important influence on my whole time in Second Life and virtual world involvement. And so to those individuals, Maged, Gentle, I owe an extreme debt of gratitude. And I'm tearing up a little here, just reflecting back because I did learn so much from them. And I also, of course, thank Kevin for doing that presentation at Drexel and starting the whole shebang. So thank you. And so with this, I mentioned that I wanted to frame this a bit within the diffusion of innovation theory. And so for diffusion of innovation, I think it's useful because it looks at any innovation, which of course can include Second Life, as being an interplay of the characteristics of the innovation itself, so virtual worlds, and also of the people who can potentially adopt the innovation. So this was first proposed by Rogers in 2003, and I'll talk a little bit about each of those main interfaces of the innovation itself and the people, and try to weave that through a bit in the presentation. So the first factor related to the device or the innovation itself is relative advantage. And when I think about this now, I think this is still hugely relevant, because relative advantage is all about what is better about this innovation. So what's better about Second Life than just other forms of education, than lecture, for example, or an in-person class meeting. And so, and this was something that also was drummed into me by Maged very early on, that, you don't just replicate what you're doing in First Life, in your educational role there, with lectures and whatnot and other things. Don't try to duplicate that. Look at what the advantages are of the virtual world, and then think of ways that you can best utilize all these affordances. Another issue related to the actual innovation is compatibility. And Rogers talked about that as far as compatibility, and others have talked about it related to compatibility of the technology itself. But this is also very much related to compatibility of values and mission of your educational program or your educational institution with what's going on in virtual worlds and how they perceive virtual worlds. Let me just give you a very quick example of this. compatibility when I saw that it was not there with one of my graduate students. Now, all the other graduate students I had were pretty embracing of virtual world technology. And when I explained that, well, it's a virtual world, it's kind of like The Sims. Did you play that when you were a child? Oh, okay, yeah. But one student said, well, I've never played any sort of virtual game. I've never been interested in it. My family never supported this sort of thing. It's just not for me, and I'm very uncomfortable with it. So then, okay, plan B. I got her involved in doing the research on the various presentations that we were doing, research on the exhibits that we were producing, and I'll talk more about those, of course. And then she gradually became involved in doing some presentations and critiquing what we had, and she benefited tremendously. And really, I wouldn't say that she totally embraced it, but this was kind of a surprise to me with all of the hype about the millennials and how they embrace technology so completely, but not necessarily so. So that's talking a little bit about compatibility beyond just the technological aspects. Then complexity, I think this is one of the things that has made virtual worlds, the process of incorporating virtual worlds into education. I think this has been quite a deal breaker for many educators because it's too complex for them. They have difficulty even with things like learning management systems. I mean, I know many who are just getting comfortable with using a learning management system like Blackboard or blogging. Well, most people don't even want to blog. So I think that's one of the big factors that students seem much more able to handle complexity. Then trialability, can you try this out? Can you then adapt it, change it, see if it's going to be a good venue? Absolutely, great strength. Observability, I think that's something that which refers to, can people that are scoping out, so to speak, the innovation, can they see the results of it? Can they see what it's producing? And I think that is really this responsibility of the educator or other person in the virtual world who's creating experiences, that we need to be responsible for that and really show people at every opportunity. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about using virtual worlds as a venue for scholarship. And then reinvention, can you then, after you've trialed it, after you've spoken with people who are in your university and your program, can you then look at ways to improve it? And of course, the answer is absolutely. Then looking at the people side, how different characteristics of people interface with the desire and ability to innovate. Rogers and others who've gone after him have talked a lot about the different types of people, putting people into groups, and something I hesitate to do because I don't want to, typecast or put someone in a box, but it's useful to think of this along a scale of people that are fascinated with the technology, innovators who are very interested in the technology itself and just want to explore, learn everything about it. Early adopters who see the possibilities in the technology and want to promote it. Early majority after people that after they've seen some of the results are able to get on board. Late majority who are very reticent, not really wanting to jump on the bandwagon right away. And then what he called laggard, which seems very pejorative to me, and I feel bad even saying it, but those who those who really will probably never embrace this type of technology, but perhaps eventually we can help them to see the different opportunities that are available. So I just wanted to mention a bit about that, the background of the diffusion of innovation theory, and then refer to it again throughout the presentation, because I think it can be useful. Okay, so Crossroads, that's the theme of this conference. And there were several crossroads that I needed to really take stock, take a look at what was going on, what opportunities I had, what limitations I had, and make some decisions. And so the first of these was, where should I set up shop? What should I, what was going to be the actual setting for the effort that I was about to do? The one thing that I didn't have any trouble with, which I knew pretty much immediately as soon as I heard Kevin's presentation about Second Life, was what would I do? I knew right away that I really wanted to create a center that would help to educate the public about the profession of occupational therapy, that would provide immersive experiences for consumers about health topics, to connect with others that had similar interests, and to provide training through all of those that I just mentioned for the graduate students, because the graduate students in occupational therapy going into the profession of occupational therapy really need to have a very clear handle on how to explain health-related topics, and of course how to listen and have an appreciation of the questions and where people are coming from. But I saw this as a real opportunity for students to practice this. So that was not a dilemma or a crossroads, but what was where should I set up shop? What kind of lease? I, at first, didn't have any funding. I was doing this completely on my own, which, is limited. And then I knew and had heard about how you could have locations that were open to the whole of Second Life, or you could have one that was only available to people that were directly working with you, such as your students. And so what was important to me, and to really going back to the aims, was when I was trying out the properties, tried out EDU Island 2, I found that, especially when we first began, there was so much traffic and people were constantly coming in, and you never knew what would happen, you never knew who you would meet, and that was a very stimulating and healthy environment for the students, because guess what? That's what's going to happen in practice. You'll never know all the different things that your patients' clients will bring up to you or do. And so I found that was really important, and decided that I definitely wanted to have open access by all of Second Life, and have been very pleased with that decision. Then as time went on, I was quite satisfied with EDU Island 2. I found that the SIM management was quite good, very responsive, and the cost was not exorbitant. And I think this is a point that I wanted to make that's perhaps particular to my own experience, but I do feel that this was essential to the success that we've had, and that is that I didn't want to go full force all the way, get my own island. I wanted to start small, to start with just a parcel, rent a lease of a parcel that was renewable, and I've never regretted that. Perhaps I'm not saying that this won't be something that I'll pursue in the near future, because we do have an opportunity that I'm working with some folks who finally, I think, coming on board, the late adopters, who are very interested in submitting for a grant, that we would be beneficial to have a more closed environment. But I think that this, the openness and the ability to interface with so many different types of people has been a huge, huge factor in our success, but yet at the same time, not really doing this on a smaller scale as far as leasing the sim and where we would do it. Not having grand dreams in that regard, nor big costs. So that was the first thing. And then the second crossroads, I would say, is just going to turn around so I can see my slide. Okay. The second was, in the beginning, I was exploring, looking at, well, what could I do there and to accomplish the goals. And so I went from exploring to systematic implementation of teaching strategies and exhibit development. So in the beginning, learning the possibilities for collaboration and pedagogy, learning the tools, that was important. Then settling on project-based learning as a real key and something that, a strategy that works well in Second Life, at least for my purposes with my students. Then looking at more of the social aspects of virtual worlds, focusing more on presentation for consumers and healthcare professionals. And so that's what we're really focusing on now. So let me talk first about exploring and learning the tools. So of course, wanting to create this environment, I needed to learn basic building and scripting. And so I became involved in taking classes at what was, I don't know what the initials stand for, and I wasn't able to find those, but TUI, which was kind of a precursor to what we now have in Builders Brewery, with lots and lots of classes and wonderful instructors. And this was something that was so important, and I'm sure that I took hundreds or more of classes, because it was not that easy for me to learn it. But I love it, and that supports the work, of course. Then another important tool, consider it a tool, is the framework that the Tech Virtual Museum provided about how do you create an exhibit that's going to be interactive, that's going to draw people in, that's really going to take advantage of the virtual environment. So that was key, and all the students learned about that as well. And then as we went along, we found that we needed to have more interactive tools, so we went ahead and learned how to use holodecks so that we could create interactive objects, and we still use those. Then the next phase was project-based learning. And if you're not familiar with this, project-based learning is an educational approach that focuses on group work performed in teams. It extends over time, incorporates key milestones, and includes formative evaluation. And so this was perfect, really, because I had a group of graduate students. Typically, I had 4 or 5 graduate students who were doing their Second Life experience as a graduate assistantship. They were being funded to participate in my research endeavors. And so it was very natural for them to work in teams, very natural to, and of course necessary to have milestones and deadlines. And due to the complexity of creating exhibits and creating presentations, that had to extend over time. We then also looked at, well, how is this working? There's a lot of critique involved in that too, which was another big strength. And so students worked together in teams to create and present educational materials that were based on research. And everything had to be documented as coming from research evidence in the literature or best practice evidence in the literature. Every time that we did a new exhibit, such as on diabetes, students would delve into the literature about that and then summarize key points. And then another part of that, of course, was making sure that the language that we used was appropriate and followed principles of health literacy. And so the students benefited tremendously from this process. And I consider this definitely a best practice when you have groups of students working together to produce something, as in our case, exhibits and presentations in a virtual world. That one thing about that is that I felt that it does demand quite a bit of engagement with the students, that it took a lot of time on my part to help facilitate their work, and that's something that we haven't done as much recently, but I'm expecting that we will do it in the future. And I guess this is another part of what I wanted to convey, and that is that all this work in Second Life education within a virtual world necessarily must take place with your First Life job and work, and optionally needs to dovetail with it. So there are naturally going to be ebbs and flows in the work, and that you need to adapt and make it work within your own workload. Some of the examples of our project-based learning, things that the students produced, there were many more than this, but here are a few. One, the adapted playground, which is still available for you to check out on EDU Island 2. Students used concepts from their courses in looking at environments for people with and without disabilities, and how you might help to include both children with and without disabilities in play activities. So they were learning this in school, and then they created an adapted playground at our center in EDU Island 2. Another project still in operation is the Garden of Healthy Aging, which built upon Rowe and Kahn's landmark study on successful aging and the factors that are important for that, and provides information to help people grow as they grow older to grow and maintain their health. And so pictured there is a process where we were making a heart that had a clot in it. So of course the student pulled different pictures of what clots look like. We discussed them and then went through how do we implement that. Other students critiqued it, and we looked back and saw, how did that work? All part of the project-based learning. The stroke exhibit, which was on Health Info Island for a while, which was a blocked artery representation where visitors had to answer questions about stroke correctly in order to get through the clot and get to the end and win the prize. One of my favorites for sure. Took up a lot of space though. Then the adapted home, which is also in operation, promoted ways to adapt the home of a person who had cognitive impairments or visual disabilities, physical disabilities, in order to help them to remain at home. And so the picture depicts different keys that you can, pictures that you can click on to get information about the different adaptations for a particular type of limitation. Another very important aspect was to address social aspects of virtual worlds. What's really, the more that I've been involved in virtual worlds, the more essential and central that I believe that they are. And I think that Gentle Heron is a master of this, and being able to really harness the power of social networks to create great things. With our students, what we've been doing is to collaborate with Gentle and Virtual Ability, and the students present what they're learning about, or in school, more of the health-related topics, or common topics that might be of interest to everyone, such as managing stress or relationship building, and presenting those. So that's, of course, a complex process that also requires that they go to the literature, that they get feedback from me and from their peers. And this is really, I think, probably the most important influence on what we began to focus on, which was health literacy. And so really making sure that the exhibits that we developed and that what we conveyed in our presentations are in plain language, that they're presented in a way that can be easily understood by everyone, using more of a universal design approach, so to speak, or universal precautions approach to communication overall across the board. And so, as mentioned, I think that students, because they had to actually write out a script and write and create slides, that this really was brought out, that health literacy's importance was brought out tremendously through their work when they were wanting to become part of the social aspects of the virtual world. Okay, so I've talked about a lot right now, and I think now would be a good time to get some questions about what I've talked about so far. Looking for my question slide. I'm not seeing it, but before we go on to Crossroads 3, I'm going to go back to our last slide, and I'd like to ask for questions or discussion points. And so let's take just 5 minutes for that, because I know that I talked about a lot of different things, and I didn't want to lose anything that you might have questions about or want me to elaborate more. So I'm pleased to take questions in chat, or I guess that's how we're doing them, right? Great question, Stedman. How much time did students take? I would say that, well, of course, there are levels of being able to settle in. I think that it took probably about 3 weeks or so to get comfortable with just the basics of moving around and communicating in Second Life. But I think knowing the nuances, of course, took much longer. And I think we're all still learning that, and certainly that process took longer. But yeah, about 3 weeks. Oh, great question. What is the most challenging part for students of working with consumers? Wow, I have to get back to what I was talking about before, with that you never know what someone is going to ask, or what their point of view is, where they're coming from, because everyone is so different, and occupational therapists must be able to tune into the needs of everyone that they work with. And so I think that's probably was the most difficult. And I guess I think the other thing was another thing that they found was to be able to get beyond their own point of view in in communicating with people. Because I remember especially one incident when students were talking about were doing the managing stress presentation. And one of the students, as her prime example, was using how stressed out she felt when she didn't have her phone with her. And so, of course, I understood that, yes, that could create stress, but I had to tell her, look, the people who are attending, some of them will have lost loved ones, sustained life-changing injuries and disabilities, and and may have had all kinds of disasters and that they've experienced. And so, think about how not having your phone with you might not be something that they could relate to. So I think those two things that are pretty much interconnected. Now, there was another question about the Garden of Healthy Aging. Let's see, let me just go back to the local. Did your students evaluate with older users? Yes, we did. Thank you. We did an entire evaluation of the Healthy Aging, the Garden of Healthy Aging exhibit, and it was very interesting what we found out. And one of the things, I guess we found out most about what was most important to them and what they would like to see more of. And one of the big topics that came up was caregivers. And so, information and resources relating to caregiving. And so that then produced, we made more exhibits on caregiving, but we also, especially in regard to caring for a person with Alzheimer's disease, there was a strong interest in that. And so that's when we initiated a caregiving support group that ran for several months and was a great experience for students, and we hope was helpful for the caregivers. Great question. What kinds of resources did we offer students in being able to build and script and so forth? Did I encourage them? I did encourage them to attend, but I found that they really wanted to learn it. They seemed to want to learn it more from me. And so I ran some basic classes on building and scripting for them. But they were encouraged to, and I think what was difficult about attending the classes was their schedules. The occupational therapy students in our program are just scheduled every second. And so they did find that going back to, I think it's called Hippo Build, some of the kits that you could take were very useful to them because they could do them whenever they wanted to. Also a great question. Okay, I think probably we should move along to the next section. And perhaps you can hold your questions till the end when we go over this. So let me go on to that third area. And that is looking at opportunities for scholarship and faculty development in Second Life. So the question is, what routes will establish and promote virtual worlds as venues for legitimate scholarship? And I think that this is a very important one because I don't know about you in your educational setting or program, but it's certainly documented that there's an increasing emphasis on outcomes and making sure that what you are doing, what you're focusing on in your areas of research interest that is going to help fulfill the um, the opportunities and obligations of your role as a faculty person. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the virtual venues and how I translated them into venues for legitimate scholarship. So the main areas were grant funding, and as mentioned, I was very fortunate to work with Maged on a UK land grant where we were provided free land in order to establish a sexual health sim, and then to produce a publication that discussed that for a peer-reviewed journal, the Health Information and Libraries Journal. We also published in the Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. And so essentially taking some of these opportunities and collaborations and translating them into publications. Now the grants were not huge grants. Again, I kept my efforts very focused, not large scale. I was funded through the Jefferson School of Health Professions intramural grants, and also the Department of Occupational Therapy has been extremely supported and funded the actual land leasing. I presented the findings of the Garden of Healthy Aging at the Gerontological Society of America, and the presentation went over pretty well. And then at a later GSA meeting, I was able to actually talk with one of the founders of Successful Aging, their landmark study, and tell him that I had done this. And all he said was that it was very interesting to see all the different ways that people had used his work, which I found very gratifying. But on another note, I have one of the difficulties I think that I found in publishing, in establishing this as an area of scholarship, is that when you're looking at making an impact on consumers, that journals have very specific requirements that at least I was not able to meet. At least when I submitted it, I submitted a journal article for the gerontologist about our study of the program evaluation of the Garden of Healthy Aging and the findings related to the older adults and their perceptions. And so the manuscript was immediately rejected with the statement that they do not accept any articles that do not have behavioral outcomes. And so, that's a stumbling block. They didn't want anything with perceptions. They didn't want surveys. So, how do you get those behavioral outcomes? So that still leaves me scratching my head a bit. But I think it also speaks to how educational research is not so much funded or valued in funding or in publication as, randomized controlled clinical trials, more intervention research. So I think that's in part where we are in our research endeavors. However, that said, and I think perhaps because of that as well, I think it's important and necessary when establishing virtual worlds as legitimate avenues for scholarship that you look beyond presentations and publications and grants to Web 2.0. And so some of the things that I think definitely contributed were the YouTube videos that we made of Second Life and the work that we were doing. And again, this goes back to the responsibility that I talked about related to diffusion of innovation, of being able to demonstrate what you're doing. So we did that through the videos on YouTube, looking at the sexual health sim, was one of that, various videos of the occupational therapy center, of the different areas of focus that the students worked on, and so that's all on the YouTube channel. And making those videos, I framed them as scholarly endeavors, that these were scholarly works, and submitted those as part of my portfolio for application for professor, which was accepted. Along with being able to really promote work in virtual worlds, we also have found that the blog that we established is quite important and is a way to reach people all over the world and give them ideas about what they might do, and to connect with other people with similar interests. We also, in doing the Garden of Healthy Aging, have done a wiki that is a complement to the Garden of Healthy Aging material, so that if people want more information, say, on the importance of social support or caregiving with a person with Alzheimer's disease, that they can go to the wiki and get to more information. And there again, we had a very strong focus on following principles of health literacy. And so that was a tremendous learning experience also for the students. And so it was really a combination of things. It was the grants, publications, presentations, and the Web 2.0 that I think can be used to establish that virtual worlds are legitimate areas for scholarship. So what now? We've done all that. Going back to diffusion of innovation, there are a couple things that I'm working on or considering. One is working with a team of researchers to develop a grant proposal that will establish an orientation that will help students in the health professions, multiple health professions, interprofessional, to work with people from an underserved and very challenging population. A sliding or rubbing noise on my audio? You know, there's I'm hearing something from my computer. Maybe that's it. It's like a white noise. Sorry about that. I don't think that I can remove that. So anyway, working on this grant proposal, and working with people that at first were definitely not on board with virtual worlds, but now, especially seeing some of the work that's been done, and with the passage of time, of course, are now very open and fully embracing the potential of virtual worlds for helping students to gain skills and knowledge and be able to practice in a safe environment prior to working with this challenging population. There's also an innovation challenge that my university is sponsoring that's going to be similar to the Shark Tank. I don't know if I have the time or the guts to pursue this, but it's certainly intriguing, and I've talked with another faculty member about this, so depending on how things go, that may also happen. And to me, this would be to promote a virtual campus, virtual program that would focus on health literacy for all the departments that, I mean, it's still being formed, but that each department might produce some materials in their areas of expertise that could then be translated and into real usable concepts and language that would benefit the people of Second Life. So that's a little bit about what I'm thinking about now, and we're getting close to the end of the presentation, and I'll ask for your questions about the last part or about anything that that I've talked about before. So we'd love to hear your questions. Please put them in chat. Thank you. Thank you, Agile. I'm also going to be putting a slide share up with this and the references, so I'll post that. Have my students gone on to do research using SL? No, they've only been involved in doing research with under my direction so far.
Any other questions from the audience? I think there's another one.
I did address that students have not gone on to do research using SL thus far. Yeah. And I think, that's really speaks to what's needed in order to be able to do research, because I find that even with my doctoral students that they do need quite a bit of shaping and help in formulating their ideas. And no one really, I mean, the way I look at it, no one really does solo research. So it takes a lot to be able to do research. And then you put in SL that not so many people are familiar with. So, but I do anticipate that it will happen in the future. Okay, question, do you find, given the difficulties for funding larger grants, that there may be some implied bias against virtual environments like SL? Possibly, but and I'm is Gentle Heron here? I might defer that question to her too, because of the wonderful project that she's been involved in with the PCORI grant, patient-centered, patient-centered research outcomes. That I believe that perhaps it has been true that there is bias, but I think now there's more openness, and I would point to the PCORI grant as an example. And Gentle, if you would be so kind as to perhaps talk a little bit about what that is, and maybe you already did. More openness from large funders. Mm-hmm.
Yes, she mentions in chat that there's less bias, more openness from larger funders.
Mm-hmm.
And that the PCORI folks were thrilled to see a proposal using virtual worlds. Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful.
That's fabulous. I think that shows the future. Yeah, that's very exciting and encouraging. How do you... Oh, shall I answer that, or are we...
Yes, go ahead. Time? Go ahead and answer that.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with hostility towards academics doing research in SL by in-world residents posting surveys on official forums? I haven't encountered that, Ivan. I've found that people have been very open.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think we may be out of time at this point. Thank you all so much for coming. This was a wonderful discussion. Susan, excellent presentation. I love the work you're doing with occupational therapy. Thank you very much. Everyone, stick around. We've just begun today's activities. We have a great program this day. Thank you all. Susan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and thanks to everyone who attended.